Hello everybody, welcome back to the table. Today we are taking a look at a brand new knife from Spyderco. So this right here is the Massad Ayoob Folder. And so this particular one is a sprint run that was recently released, and it has these gray G10 handles, but really the showstopper here is the blade. So take a look at the blade of this knife. It comes in at this crazy downswept angle, and this was really a purpose-built knife. So if you are not familiar with the story behind the Massad Ayoob Folder, they actually included a little bit of information here on the little leaflet that came with the knife. So let's, really quickly read through that together and then chat about this knife. So Massad Ayoob is a world-renowned expert in firearms combat shooting and the justifiable use of lethal force. Prolific author, instructor, and martial artist. He's been a sworn law enforcement officer for more than 4 decades. So that gives you the background behind the designer of this knife. And originally introduced in 2001, his Massad Ayoob folding knife is one of the most unique Spyderco designs ever produced. The distinctive negative angle between its blade and handle naturally aligns the blade with the bones of the forearm. This ensures a direct transfer of force during thrusting tactics and accentuates the power of cutting actions. And it also shortens the blade's opening arc, making rapid deployment of the knife quicker and more positive. So I'm glad they included this little flyer here with the knife, because again, it describes the use case for this knife. The designer was a self-defense expert, and so that was his thoughts first and foremost in designing this knife. And so this sprint run, as far as I can tell, is now the 3rd run of the Ayoob Folder that Spyderco has produced. So what we have here this time with this new iteration, this right here has the gray G10 handles. We have a 4-way positionable pocket clip, so you can carry this knife tip up, tip down, left or right hand side carry, depending on your preference. And what we have with blade steel this time, we have some CPM CruWear. And so as you can tell, this blade right here, this is the plain edge variant of the knife. And so this was produced with the plain edge blade like we see here, but it was also produced with that really wicked full serrated Spyderedge edge on it. So they call the full serrations a Spyderedge. And what was surprising is seeing this knife sell through and sell out at so many retailers at this point. The Spyderedge, the fully serrated version of this knife, seems to go even faster than the plain edge variant. And that kind of surprises me, because in almost any other knife design, the fully serrated versions are usually not quite as popular as the plain edge variants. And for me, that's because, of course, serrations are harder to sharpen than plain edge knives. But I think for such a purpose-built knife, in this case, the purpose being self-defense, having that really wicked serrations, those things, they cut like laser beams, and the fact that you're going to reserve this knife for that purpose means those serrations could definitely get you out of a bind. And they're going to cut, time and time again without too much issue. So that being said, though, as we can see, this is the plain edge variant of the knife. The CPM CruWear. I have never owned a CruWear knife before, but again, included in the box, Spyderco includes some information telling us this is not a stainless steel blade per se. So let's just read the little information they sold us here. The knife in this box is a high carbon, high performance blade and components that are not rust resistant. It requires proper and diligent maintenance to keep it corrosion free. So whether you use the knife or not, it should be protected from moisture or exposure to moisture, oils, fluids. Clean and wipe the entire blade surface regularly with oil. So you have to keep this knife clean. Otherwise, what's going to happen to the surface of this blade, you are going to get, start to notice a very fine patina start to form, like any carbon steel blade. So no different than, like a 1095 or an 01 tool steel, something like that. And so even in just the light handling that I've been subjecting the knife to since I picked it up, we can still see some slight spotting along the handles here, or along the blade here, along the spine. And that is just from opening and closing the knife. And so if I want to keep this knife rust free with this perfectly shiny satin blade, I got to be careful to keep it oiled, keep it nice and clean and wiped down. So if you carry this knife on a regular basis, you will get some surface wear, some patina forming over time, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for the collectors out there, if you wanted to keep it looking pristine, it's going to take some work to do so. But of course, the whole fact that we're using CruWear, that's a very high tolerance steel. They included information about CruWear as well. But if you're watching this video, you probably have an idea what CruWear can do for you. Super steel, very, very good wear resistance on that knife steel. So really, really cool looking blade, very wicked shape. But in terms of just raw, gritty, nitty gritty details, the gray G10 scales very thin. If you look inside the handles here, you'll notice the steel frame is completely skeletonized out, and they did that for weight reduction because let's look at the size of this knife, So the blade length on this knife, the actual sharpened cutting edge comes in pretty much right at 3.5 inches long. But when we measure the overall length of the knife, the angle kind of makes it awkward to do it, but you can see here, the overall length of this knife is coming in like at 8 3/4 inches. So it is, in my opinion, a full size defensive folder. So it feels big in hand, but it still carries very thin. And despite the size of the knife, the weight is coming in under 5 ounces. So we are right around 4.9 ounces with this knife. So thankfully they did the skeletonizing to help with that, to keep it as lightweight as possible. But some really interesting design choices here. Of course, we have the 4-way positionable pocket clip. And now it came to me in the tip down right-hand side position. So right here, as you can see, when you carry it like that, nothing wrong with it. It follows the fold of your pocket perfectly fine, but quite a bit of the knife does stick out of the pocket. I think what a lot of people are going to do, myself included, of course. First thing I did was switch this pocket clip down to tip up right-hand side carry. And so in doing that, you'll notice this pocket clip, it's a standard Spyderco clip, but you'll notice we have Phillips head screws here. And so now if you intend to keep this pocket clip in your preferred position, you might want to use some Loctite on these screws, because I noticed just unscrewing the clip from the frame here, there are very few threads keeping it attached to the handle. The screws are fairly shallow. And so it is a Phillips head bit right here. So you're going to want to find one that fits these screw heads very precisely so that you don't accidentally strip out any of these screw heads. But again, seeing Phillips head screws on folding knives is somewhat rare nowadays. We tend to see that a little bit more with some US made folders. I know Emerson's use them, but not too many other brands. We do have body screws as well, so 3 body screws that go through the knife as well. And what's also interesting, look at the size of those heads on these screws here. You might think they're T6, but they're not. So these are actually T5 Torx bit heads. And so T5 is, again, a relatively uncommon screw size in the knife world. Whether it's there to discourage you from taking this knife apart or for some other reason, that was the design choice here. The pivot is a T8, which again, standard, very commonly available. So we need T8, T5, and Phillips to access all of the screws on this knife. Again, I don't recommend taking this apart by any means, but that's what you would need if you were going to go that route and do that. But this is a lockback design, as you can tell. And again, the knife here was introduced in 2001. So again, that kind of describes the design language here, the build quality here. And again, this is the 3rd run of this knife that has ever come into existence. So the original run in 2001, again, correct me if I'm wrong on any of this information, but the original run had aluminum handles. I want to say it was about 10 years later, they did a run in black G10 handles. And now another 10 plus years later, we're doing this run with gray G10 handles. And so the fact that we've seen 3 runs of this knife in now 20 plus years leads me to believe this is about a once in a decade folder. So if you want this knife, your goal should be to get one in your hands as quickly as possible. And that being said, I'm hoping by the time I get this video up, there'll still be some available. They have been just kind of slowly trickling through knife dealers. And if you want to purchase one, I did find a thread on the Spyderco forums where people were posting links where there were still some actively available for sale. Again, by the time you see this, it might be too late, unfortunately, but I did want to, send out the word while I still could. I literally bought this knife the moment it became available. This one I purchased from Knife Center. And now I didn't buy expedited shipping or anything, but it did take a little less than a week to get into my hands. but really cool design. This particular one is made in Seki City, Japan. So that is the same location where our Spyderco Enduras, our Dragonflies, our Delicas are also made. So real quick, let's just do a size comparison, because this one compares pretty favorably in size to the Spyderco Endura. But let's compare it to an Endura and a Delica, just side by side, and it can give you somewhat of an idea of the size of the Massad Ayoob Folder. So check it out. So side by side, you know, I know the shape makes it not the greatest one-to-one comparison, but very similar overall to the Endura. Of course, different materials, different shape, totally, but these are all Japanese-made Spydercos, and it's really cool to see such an old design brought back again. I don't know if it was just due to popular demand or they had some other reason to resurrect it, but I think the collectors are really going to like this one. But again, one thing that I noticed, those Spyderedge fully serrated variety are flying off the shelves. And so normally I would never consider a fully serrated knife just because serrations are so hard to mess with. But for a knife like this, it kind of makes sense. And it also does make sense too. They probably produced fewer of the fully serrated version than the plain edge. So from a collector's standpoint, maybe you want that version of the knife if you just want it to sit on your shelf and look pretty. But really nice knife design. I love this style. Again, while I may never use this knife for self-defense, you can see the shape of it like described in the little paper right here. It is very thrustable. It is naturally meant to sit in your hand and make it easy to do that poking motion with the blade. And again, that was the gentleman's idea when designing this knife, because of course back in 2001 I can guarantee you there was absolutely nothing else like this knife on the market. So the Massad Ayoob Folder, really cool. Glad they brought it back. If you were able to get one, please drop a comment below, tell me how yours came out. Other than that, please drop a comment if you have any questions. Hope you all have a nice day, everybody. See you later. Bye bye.